It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Welcome to February's edition of Learning Now Television. This month we've got input from learning experts around the world. Nigel, what's happening?
Well, 3 highlights to share with you, Kate. The first one is Andy Lancaster talking about his new book and also his new role in CIPD. It's very interesting. Secondly, Joe Cook sharing with us some hints on digital body language. We all need to know about that. And finally, another research report from Martin Cousins.
Enjoy the show.
You seek him here, you seek him there, but we have managed to secure Andy Lancaster for Learning Now Television. So welcome, Andy. It's very good to see you.
Thank you, and pleased to be here.
Andy, you're head of learning at CIPD, but when I last spoke to you, you were head of learning and development at CIPD. Tell me what that shift means. Is it significant?
It is significant.
Okay.
So having initially gone to CIPD to see how we could reinvent and re-energise learning and development at the Institute, we came up with new philosophy and a new DNA of how learning works. And excitingly, now that's going across the whole Institute. So now the new approach applies to HR and to organisational development, talent, all of those disciplines as well. So there is a new learning function, a growing learning function at CIPD, which is incredibly exciting.
It is. So learning weaves through the Institute. It's not just a separate little bit lopped off on the edge. It's the heart of it. Isn't that in some way your complete philosophy for L&D? Encapsulated?
It is, and what's exciting is when that vision, that compelling vision is caught. Now, we've known historically that many learning people sit within HR functions. Many of those involved in organisational development are learning as part of the ecosystem that they're looking at. So what's been really exciting is to take that new philosophy, which we kind of grounded in the L&D aspect, and now apply that across the board. So really exciting. So things like learning in the flow of work, learning in the flow of life. Recently, we've been able to launch free content, exclusive content for members, which applies to every discipline. So, yeah, it's exciting times and a growing team. Yeah, it's what we need to see.
Yeah. And it's also good to see, in some ways, CIPD putting its money where its mouth is. So it's embracing a philosophy, which you've exemplified, and it's taking it on board internally and expressing that in the structure of the organisation.
Absolutely, and you'll see in increasing investment. We're looking at new technology platforms, so how we deliver learning, because obviously we're a global institute, a growing institute, so we now have to think about how we structure and we resource to be a role model of how modern learning takes place. Yeah.
And that's not really ever happened before.
I think it is a new day for us.
Yes,
there is no doubt
too.
at all. And I think what's really exciting is we see the impact working with organisations. So obviously CIPD has a consultancy and a business-to-business support as well. So we're actually involved with practitioners. So this is not just sitting divorced and theoretically thinking about this. This is right at the heart of major businesses globally, seeing how learning now interfaces with all of the people profession, and particularly things like line management as well. We know line managers are crucial in the learning ecosystem. So it's great to be able to support line managers as well.
It is. And also the younger members coming through CIPD get a vision of how it might be or how it should be. Yep. And that is very helpful. So they kind of learn just by being part of the Institute.
Yeah, and I think it is a balance between formal and informal learning.
Indeed.
So as an awarding body, we have a responsibility for creating cutting-edge leading qualifications. We're just in the process of rewriting those again.
To incorporate that new philosophy.
So there'll be that's now happening right the way through to informal learning and networking as one of the big communities of practice, and historically one of the oldest communities of practice around people profession. It's just great to see how modern workplace learning is just the golden thread through everything we're doing.
Excellent. I'm really pleased about that. That's very, very good news, and thanks for sharing that. Okay. So, one of the reasons you've come here is to talk about your book. It's called Driving Performance Through Learning. It's been out a month, 2 months, something like that, published by Kogan Page. And what's interesting about the book is the golden thread. You know, that it starts off with about transforming learning, and it finishes with transforming the roles of learning.
True.
So soup to nuts, you cover virtually every aspect of learning and development in an organisation. So the first obvious question is, why did you write that? Are there not texts out there? What makes this special?
So you've written books, and you know you don't do this unless you have a good reason, because it's
hard.
It's a challenging process. And I'd encourage people who are watching who have things to say that think about writing. I think it's important, and it crystallises your own thinking as well as sharing that with others.
You learn as much as you give, basically.
You do. And I think for me, one of the interesting things, I was going around in many organisations, speaking, consulting, supporting, and there's this constant thing of how do we make the shift? Now, we know the research historically keeps showing that we're struggling to make that shift. So for me, I put myself back into head of learning or a learning development manager, say, how do you now make this shift? And for me, I kind of go back to a really rich and important time in my career when I worked in drugs rehab. You're probably wondering where I'm going with this one, but it's really interesting because at that season, we help people make the most compelling and challenging changes in their lives. And the model which underpinned that is something that's always stuck with me, which is trans-theoretical model. You can go and look like this in the book. But what's really important is it's very difficult to do change unless you have a compelling vision of where this is going. I think what we've lacked in learning and development is how to put all those pieces together with something which is really compelling. So for me, it was about that process, about all these different things, how we put them together. And I think in L&D, we're often like a moth around lights. We go and fly a bit around data analytics, we go and fly around curation, we go and fly around technologies. So it was an attempt to bring this all together in a coherent vision of what modern workplace learning looks like.
So what you want to come out of it is the reader comes out with a real sense of direction. This is what I want to do in the organisation I work for.
Yeah, and when I wrote it, I mean, there's frequent reflection stops. So I think this is about, we're all in different contexts, but it's about taking the content and thinking how it applies. And I had a lovely comment came to me as a private message on Twitter, and someone said, I've read the book and I feel like I'm co-creating in my environment. You're helping me to understand what this looks like, but through the reflection and through the referencing, because, I did a heavy lifting on the referencing. So it's a co-creation book where you can take the principles and apply it to your own context.
Yep, and I think what I like is partly the fact that you break it down into nice stages. It's got a nice flow to it as you work through the content. But I also like the fact that this isn't Andy Lancaster's view of the world. This is Andy Lancaster having thought hard, read hard, and providing evidence to show that this is a coherent view of the world. And not every book does that. You know, that a lot of people, when they start writing, they begin to think that their view of the world is all that matters. But I think that if you don't bring evidence, you don't really deserve the platform. And you bring a lot of evidence, and you allow people to move off in any number of directions through the evidence that you bring. So if you're really interested in this, you can explore it, because you say where it comes from, you tell us who the main proponents are, and you tell us where to start. That is very, very helpful, I think.
Thank you. I mean, I think evidence-based practice is at the heart of what CIPD does.
It should be.
It has to be.
Terrible if it wasn't.
And sometimes, is there no bandwagon which L&D won't jump on? I mean, that's the reality. Often, we're very fickle to the latest trends. So for me, it's looking at trends, not fads.
Yes.
Trends are looking at the underlying evidence base. So evidence-based. So someone said to me, you must have had an army of researchers on this book from the amount of references. No, it was done with my own fair hands. And I think that's important, Nigel, that we do this heavy lifting and we go back and really review these things. So,
I would hope to be able to open the book at random and say, you said that, why? And you can say to me, I said that because of what I've read, the work that I did with this company, the effort that we've done in thinking this through in CIPD. That's the kind of position that anyone in L&D has to be able to take if you're going to get learning going like that golden thread that you talked about. It's correct, isn't it? If you can't bring evidence, who's going to listen to you? Who's going to take you seriously?
Indeed, and I think for me then extrapolating some new models, now we need to be careful on models because they're always imperfect, but to come up with some new models, particularly the one around socialised learning, I found it really interesting. Having been around lots of organisations, I just began to gather evidence of what was working. It was interesting. It's a tough gig to run successful learning communities. So there's new models in there. There's some thinking around digital learning, about what transforms digital solutions for us in normal life. So from that, those kind of models naturally emerged, and again, hopefully highly pragmatic, which can be used in various contexts.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that's absolutely a great way to finish, that what you've done is written something that is highly pragmatic, but also highly theoretical and evidence-based. You've managed to cover both ends of a very important spectrum. And the kind of hidden message is, so should everyone who reads this book, so should everyone in L&D. You have to be pragmatic, you have to keep an eye on trends and bits of software, but you also need to think about where the evidence is and have some heavy lifting around learning, because this is about learning, and you've got to know a little bit about that at the very least.
Yeah, and I think for finishing it, I mean, the hardest bit is how do you finish a book?
Yes.
You know, you've written all this stuff. So for me, it just suddenly dropped. We need a manifesto.
Yes. So
we need a manifesto. So right at the end, it gathers together in a hopefully a compelling manifesto of where organisations are going, how our practice needs to change, and also really importantly how our roles need to change.
Yes, and about transforming.
Absolutely.
It's about the end of it is all about transforming.
Yeah.
And that should be a pretty good bottom line that you leave everyone with.
Thank you.
So Andy, it's very, very good to talk to you. Good luck, and I hope that as CIPD evolves and develops, we're going to see the manifestations of these changes in virtually everything it does. And that can only be useful for everybody in the profession writ large, i.e. the talent, people, elements of work, which are increasingly important. So good luck to you, good luck with the book, and good luck with CIPD. Thanks very much for talking.
Thanks.
It's a pleasure.
Our learning experiences unlock potential, transform the performance of people and organisations, and help millions around the world build happy and successful careers. We change lives with evidence-based learning that works, sparking real change for real impact.
Learning Technologies 2020 was as busy and buzzy as ever, and we were lucky enough to have Rob Clark, roving reporter from Learning News, on the ground doing lots of interviews for us. So here's what he captured.
Exchanging point of ideas. You know you'll meet people who are in the same situation.
To provide a voice for young up-and-coming leaders and to provide an opportunity for them to connect.
L&D managers are hungry of new ideas and new way to train people.
People are coming here potentially for the first time to look at the industry and understand the technologies.
A really good opportunity to kind of meet some more like-minded people and be challenged a little bit more.
It's the biggest, I think, learning technology show in the world. So for us, it's just a great opportunity to meet new people that come to the industry, to show all the new things we're thinking about.
To help inform corporates and sellers what the realities are of the adoption and use and the advocacy around different learning technologies.
Men versus women in senior roles is about 2/3 men to 1/3 women. So it kind of stemmed from that as a desire to improve the balance and help women get to the top.
We're looking to support organisations in transformation and understanding how we can use technology, leverage technology for real behaviour change.
3 companies with a great heritage, but we are bringing them together. Mind tools, good practice and towards maturity. This is our first public outing as Emerald works.
Filtered is announcing our fully featured integration into Microsoft Teams.
The e-learning network, or ELN, is a community interest company, and we exist really in order to help anybody working in the industry to connect and network.
We're launching GameBrain, which is all about learning engagement.
Learning Pool is here talking about the ecosystem, the idea of developing the perfect ecosystem for the modern learner.
We have a user-focused, employee-focused learning platform that serves as an enterprise-level technology.
Our goal is to support our clients in understanding not just the LMS that they choose, but its connection and its integration to all the different products that they're going to need to build the entire ecosystem.
Super personalization of content, the right use of AI to present the right content at the right moment in time to the right person for the right budget.
It's a big challenge to get data out of a lot of these different systems, and we've been able to do that at a large global scale for a lot of significant organizations.
The employer brand is being built around that development and how organizations build capability to differentiate themselves. Learning is becoming a competitive advantage.
The skills life for pretty much every organisation in the industry is getting shorter and shorter, down from 10 years to 5 years, down to 2.5 years. The old way of the answer is a course delivered out to X thousand of people. It just doesn't fit anymore.
Candidates that can actually prove a return on investment, candidates that can communicate with senior stakeholders.
Ask questions around the intent and outcome of performance in the workflow, not always pivoting on contents and what our SMEs want us to create.
iSpring is an all-in-one e-learning toolkit, yet it keeps everything very simple and easy to use.
The Access Group has gone out to acquire some of the best learning and development organisations in the industry. We're obviously very proud to be part of that.
To create digital learning that is not only beautiful and effective and pushes the technology, but also has that wow factor.
Our real expertise lie within the creation of bespoke digital solutions.
Producing really creative, engaging e-learning content that makes a difference, that makes an impact.
The big challenge for us and for our customers is to find solutions that are easy to use and easy to roll out.
We have to make it easier for them to buy, and we have to make it easier for people to learn. But ultimately, we have to design experiences that work for the learners.
Simulations using bite-sized learning, a platform that allows you to access learning in different use cases.
What clients are seeking now is clarity through this kind of maze of offerings, and it's really finding trusted partners.
How can we make it more engaging? How can we improve the experience? How can we provide better value for our clients?
L&D still has to face the main difficulties, and that's learning that's engaging and that sticks.
How do you engage learners investing their time in learning? And Degreed, as we've said, is really answering that question by completing the career development circle.
The way in which learning and HR is organised in organisations, they're going to be much more closely managed together, I think.
Helping to deliver the objectives, the aspirations, the dreams, the problems and challenges of the business, and your frame of reference is how well the business is doing, not how well learning is.
Would you like to do an MBA that is based on people more than strategy and finance, that explores happy workplaces and how you create organisations based on trust and freedom? That's what Happy is planning to launch in June 2020 in partnership with Ravensbourne University, a creative and media college. And it will all be funded from the apprenticeship levy. So if your organisation pays a levy, it will come out of that levy. If it doesn't pay the levy, because you're a small organisation, it will only cost £1,000 for a 2-year development programme with other senior leaders, spending at least a day a month in the classroom and committing 20% of your time to it, including a major project in your organisation to put these ideas into practice. The Happy MBA from June 2020.
As Learning Now TV begins to take over the world, we've plugged another country into our group of rising stars who correspond for us. And today I'm very pleased to announce Laurie Niles Hoffman is going to regularly contribute, focusing on digital transformation beyond launch day.
What I wanted to talk about today are a few of the tips and tricks that we've learned along the way that really have helped our clients through their digital transformations. The first one is thinking beyond day one. Clients usually contact us because they've bought or invested in a platform, they've launched it, and they're not getting the engagement that they expected, and they're very concerned. And the reasons for this are many, but the primary one is they haven't really thought about a content strategy beyond just the launch. So they've done very good work in terms of the marketing and stakeholder engagement and the promotion, but what they haven't done is thought about what content is going to go on there day 2, day 3, day 360. And so we work with clients for them to understand how to drip feed content, how to segment their audiences, to have a weekly plan so they know what is going to be posted, by whom, and who are they going to be targeting. And that way, when people come to the site, the content is constantly refreshed and tailored to their needs. That's not to say some platforms will have some form of AI or machine learning that will do some of that heavy lifting for you, but it's best not to rely on it because really there's nothing better than a little bit of personalization and some hand-holding, especially when you're trying to change behaviors to drive people to your content. The other thing is it is very challenging to switch from courses to resources. I highly recommend the work of Nick Shackleton-Jones in this space. But for most teams, to really operationalize that switch where they're no longer producing just courses and now they're moving into other media types, it's really challenging. So you're going to need to think about how that team needs to be upskilled. You may need to look at videography, graphic design. The other person that I always recommend that you should have within your team, or at least somebody that you can call, is a digital media journalist. They will be able to interview a subject matter expert and within a few hours have an excellent article with a great hook and headline and some great storytelling. So be sure to have one of those at least in your vicinity. The other thing that teams get locked down with is when you invest in one of these platforms, what the challenge is that you need to be able to be quite nimble. And we get really handcuffed with the annual plan. We secure our funding for the year. We say, this is what we're going to produce 12 months out. But the challenge with that is that we cannot pivot for the business when they need us. So we really become paralyzed by that. The business comes to us month 3 with a learning need, and we've already committed all of our resources, time, and budget to something that maybe isn't as much of a priority to the business. So that's something that we're going to start thinking differently about and maybe not become so wedded to. The other thing that you will need to think about is a community engagement manager. This is something marketing does very well. There's a reason where if you text Nando's or Wendy's in the middle of the night, somebody or tweet at them, somebody answers you. That is a community engagement manager. And you'll need to have them for your site. And it may not just be one person. It may be the role of a few people, but it's something where those people are going in, monitoring what's being talked about, following up on the hashtags, connecting people, seeding content, running some engagement campaigns, and basically keeping the momentum on the site in a very valuable and meaningful way. The last thing I would also say too is pilot. A lot of L&D teams, they come to me and they have a laundry list of all the things that they want on their new platform or their new EdTech stack ecosystem. And that's great, but they haven't really looked at what the learner is going to use. They just have a wish list. And the fact is, it's not about us in L&D, it's about those end users. So work with your vendors, make sure that you do a small pilot that covers a wide spectrum of your audience, and then dig into the data and find out what tools they are using and what they aren't using. And that really should give you a lot of information in order to make an informed decision about what is going to be the best platform and or ecosystem for your company. So I hope all of that was helpful, and that's it from here. Bye now.
Helen Blunden is back, and she's interviewing John Moore from Cerner. He has 30,000 staff and associates, and they're using live synchronous streaming to communicate with their cohort of employees and associates. So it's kind of massive scale synchronous learning.
Thank you so much, John, for agreeing to be part of this interview. Mm-hmm. Now, we met online on Twitter, and I remember I sent out a tweet, and because you were doing some really good stuff around live streaming, and I thought, I need to know more. So I've asked you along so you can tell us more about what this live streaming is about in your company. But before we go into that, could you tell us more? Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's John Moore. I'm a senior technology architect at Cerner. We're a US-based company, but we're a global healthcare technology company. So we have offices all over the globe. We call our employees associates. We have about 30,000 associates across the globe. including a couple offices in Australia around by where you are. So as a technology architect, my team owns Office 365 and its capabilities. So we're in the end user computing space, and that's all the way from supporting the laptops and the physical technology that we deliver to our associates, as well as these cloud services like the productivity suites and Office 365. So my team, we own the capabilities of Office 365. Basically, there's people that own identity and security and other parts of Office 365, but we kind of own the overall platform.
Right. And this is really interesting because I've been working with IT people recently, and I see that there's a big move. Like, you guys are not just all about the technology, you're also about educating people around Microsoft 365. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as we've moved into these cloud services with especially Office 365, the world has kind of shifted for us as IT professionals. We're tasked a lot more with the change management around Office 365 and getting our users ready for the move to the cloud and what that means, as well as how to best use these collaboration tools that a lot of challenge around what to use when, and different solutions that are available. There's a whole suite available to our associates, and when should I use Teams versus when I use Yammer? I feel that's a lot of times best answered by the IT professionals who are working with it all day.
Okay.
With teaching our users how to host their own Teams live events in Microsoft Teams, put ourselves in the shoes of our sales demo team and say, hey, from end to end, from scheduling and all the logistics of my meeting, how do I go all the way through, make sure that the attendees have the right link so they get to the right place? How do I move from one presenter to the next seamlessly? How do we pitch it to a remote presenter? How do I get the recording at the end? We go all the way through to the end where you're sending the follow-ups. And we actually recorded that, and we've developed classes that my team actually designs and records all of these classes. We call them Mastering Office 365, and it's a course series. This one was Build Your Broadcast with Microsoft Teams. We have other ones like Modernize Your Business Processes with Microsoft Flow. So we pick a specific technology in the 365 stack and kind of say, okay, what is this going to do for you as an end user doing the regular business tasks? And this seems to have resonated really well. We've been doing it for about 2 years now.
As an IT professional who's rolling out and educating your staff around Microsoft 365, do you also provide those skills to others in the organisation? Do you give, are you also responsible for helping those people skill up around conducting live streamings? Do you see it in the future that it'll only just be IT rolling it out? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. We've actually developed a Microsoft Champions group. So we have about 70 folks out of the 30,000. We've identified about 70 or so that are very on the forefront. They're influential in the business, so it's good to be on their good side and give them a little bit of extra help, a little bit of, hey, here's where we're going, so that they can help us carry that message on. And we've actually given them access to live events, and we've been teaching them how to do these live events. It hasn't taken off wildfire just yet, but we're hoping that we get in these specific use cases so we can see live events kind of percolate throughout the organization, if you will. Ultimately, what I want to get to is I've been kind of trying to call it the democratization of live streaming. Ultimately, I would like everyone at Cerner to be able to go live and share their thoughts, share whatever that is, they're an expert on. But right now we're starting with our champions, and we're kind of developing the education, because the live streaming we're talking about with Yammer requires some special knowledge of software, some special equipment potentially. And we kind of don't want people to get too far out ahead of themselves. So we want to be there, right along them learning, so they don't get frustrated with like encoding software or stuff like that.
Now, I just want to ask, though, a lot of the people who are listening and watching this this interview, they might be thinking, well, okay, so where do I start? If how would you help someone who is just starting into the live streaming journey? What would you recommend for them?
So the way that I started myself was just educating myself literally through YouTube videos. We're kind of going the route with this, with this kind of democratized live streaming. It matches a lot what like gamers are doing on Twitch or YouTube Live or Facebook Live. It's kind of, I see it almost in the industry wide as one of those things like a file sync and share, where that really hadn't hit the business yet. OneDrive wasn't a thing. Dropbox was a thing, maybe a decade ago. And a lot of IT admins were aware of the technology, but kind of thinking, oh, we've got several years until that hits us. It kind of feels like live streaming is the same thing. The people who are in high school and college and are going to be in the workforce here pretty soon, they're already used to this. They're already doing Twitch. They're already learning everything through YouTube. So I feel like over the next maybe couple years or even sooner, we're going to start having these people enter the workforce and expect the ability to live stream, expect the ability to share their thoughts through video. And I kind of want to be ready for that. So the way that I learned is to learn from those people. A lot of them are probably 10 plus years younger than me, but some of their personalities are a little bit difficult to watch on videos. They're like gaming streamers, so they're a little bit animated, but they have a ton of information and they're willing to share like how to do this in coding software. So I downloaded OBS, which is an open broadcasting software, and I just started watching YouTube videos to learn step by step how to set it up. And then I read a quick Microsoft document about how to connect that to Yammer, which literally was paste this URL into this box and you're connected. It was really easy.
Yeah.
So a lot of that kind of building it was taking from the gaming community and taking from the live stream community and being like, okay, how can I like kind of polish this and make it a little bit more, business friendly, so it's not quite so many neon crazy colors and animations and fire in the background. Change it to a picture of your company's building, and then it's professional.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All the best with the education of Cerner, and I look forward to seeing some more stuff on Twitter. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
DPG's online courses are designed to fit around your life, so you can study anytime, anywhere. Get in touch now for more info.
So the purpose of learning and development is to improve the performance and capability of people. But a recent survey by McKinsey showed that 75% of respondents say that learning and development or training did not improve the performance of its people. So where does that leave us? Robin Hoyle investigates.
In corporate learning and development, our job is to help individuals and teams improve their competence and, working with other parts of the organisation, thereby improve overall capability, improve performance, and maybe even increase productivity. I mean, that's what our purpose is. And when I've talked about that with others in the field, most people may quibble about some of the words that I use, but fundamentally everybody's on the same page. We all agree with that. And yet, report after report says that businesses think that learning and development teams are not necessarily aligned with the organisation. In other words, they are not making a positive contribution to measurably impactful business performance improvement. And that seems to me to be a bit of an issue which we need to examine. So where does that disconnect come around? In part, we have to look at our own shortcomings. Quite a lot of what I see in corporate learning and development is focused around annual tick box compliance or onboarding programs which spend more time on the history of the organisation than on what it's like to work there, and individual leadership and management programs which are kind of sub-business school theoretical models, but not really what do I do differently on Tuesday to make sure my people are giving of their best. So there is some criticism which is justified towards us if we're not really focused on how people can actually improve what they do. And I wasn't able to go to the Learning Technologies exhibition and conference this year because of other commitments. So I went through the 200 plus exhibitor blurbs, which is on the website there, and what struck me was how few of those organisations talk about how they actually impact business performance. maybe 4 or 5 of them out of more than 200 exhibitors had what I would call a reasonable value proposition, which said, this is how you gain benefit within your business from what we do. Yeah, lots of talks about how we might impact learning, and quite a lot of conversation on there, which was absolutely bizarre, and I didn't understand what they do, and I've worked with learning technologies for 30 years. So this is kind of problematic that I see that jargon, that meaningless conversation going back into the workplace, and individuals within those business departments that are not directly associated with learning and development at least mentally rolling their eyes, if not physically doing so. So I can understand why there's the disconnect from our side, but we've also got to look at the disconnect from the rest of the business's side as well. Very often when I go and talk to organisations about what they want to change and how they might want to improve things, they're not really able to tell me. What we get at best is leadership by homily. People saying, well, we need to pull together, we need to work better as a team, we need to listen to our customers more, we need to break down silo working. But those are all outcomes. Nobody can talk to me about, well, how do we do that? What skills and behaviours do we want people to exhibit, which will enable us to address some of those challenges which the organisation feels it has. And some of the time we need to be quite an unpopular consultant, because what we're actually talking about is that management and leadership practice needs to change, and we need to focus our efforts where it's going to have the biggest bang for the buck. So how do we become more apparently relevant to the business, to the rest of the organisation? Well, I think there's a couple of things that we can do fairly simply. The first is, when we are asked about a possible learning and development intervention, what we do is we focus on, well, what are the behaviours and skills that people are actually going to use in the workplace which will achieve the performance gain that we want? Where are those competencies that we want people to have? And once we've identified and defined those, we go back to the business and say, we think it's this, is that right? And we talk that through with both the leaders and those people who will be the target of that learning intervention. And then, and only then, would we decide whether or not that was a learning and training intervention which was required, because very often it might not be. It might be a comms intervention, it might be something about the way that work is organised, it might be giving people access to different technologies or different ways of working. But fundamentally, what we then need to do where there is a learning need is to design a programme which is focused on delivering those skills. And it will only focus on delivering those skills if it's less about the content of the programme and more about support for people back in the workplace. That will be conducted by those line managers, those people who are in charge of those teams. It will hopefully be supported by the senior leaders higher up the organisation. But it will also need to involve us in being visible within the business, supporting individuals as they try to change the way that they do things in line with what we've agreed with the rest of the organisation. And only by being seen to be active at the point of work will we start to break down this idea that there is a disconnect between what we're doing and the challenges which the organisation faces in terms of its performance and its need to improve performance.
Studies have shown that learning programs are now crucial weapons in the fight to attract and retain talent. Working closely with modern learning organisations across the globe, we have developed Learning Programs of Excellence, a prestigious award recognising exceptional, state-of-the-art learning programs. If you're a learning department or function, LPE will help you attract new talent. You'll boost your appeal as an employer by showcasing the calibre of your learning programs and development opportunities within your organisation. If you're a provider of learning, LPE gives you an absolute guarantee that your learning programs are capable of creating a lasting positive effect on performance and business outcomes. Get in touch with the Learning and Performance Institute now and begin your Learning Program of Excellence journey.
This month, I'm delighted to welcome Director of Lightbulb Moment, or otherwise known as Webinar Queen Extraordinaire, Jo Cook. Thank you for coming, Jo.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So this is great. Obviously, we've known each other for a long time.
Yep.
I've probably got tons of questions I could ask you. And I think I actually want to start off with, we're going to be talking about digital body language.
Yes.
But I suppose in the context of that, webinars, they're not new, virtual classrooms, not that new, although actually some Fosway research we've got out at the moment, the survey is live. is showing investment is going up, which is quite
Really good.
interesting. But haven't we got this nailed yet?
Yeah, I wish we did. It would be great, although I would be out of business if that was the case, so maybe not. I think it's the thing of, like many things, the absolute basics. We can all turn on Skype, we can all turn on a video, we can talk to each other. The nuance of doing that really well in a webinar where you're trying to maybe sell something or market something, or in a virtual classroom where you're teaching people and you can't see them, you don't have your flip chart to hand, you can't walk around the classroom. That's when you've got to know how to design and deliver something different than your normal facilitation skills. And that's where I help people.
Okay, so many years ago, I was sat on a WebEx session and obviously checking my email at the same time. And then the instructor said, Kate, why aren't you looking at your screen? And I was like, oh. And then she knew because she had like a bing bong thing come up. So how do you start to work with people to, I suppose, stop people at the other end, their learners or their audience, going off and doing all of that stuff? And is that where the digital body language part comes in?
Okay, so the first thing is I always say if a learner is off checking their email, there's two things. One, it's more important and let them get on with it, they're an adult. Or two, I'm just not engaging enough and that's my fault and I've got to do better. And that's where the digital body language comes in. So it first came about in 2009 with Steve Woods. He's the Chief Technical Officer of Nudge and he came up with it, largely about digital marketing and understanding people on websites. So it's much more data driven. I look at it in three areas. There's the data, and you can apply that to like data driven learning and also the data you get from websites and all those kind of things. More than Google Analytics though, that's aggregate. We're talking about individuals.
Yeah.
There's also personality, and this is where I really like it. It's what's going on in my virtual classroom that I can read from people, what's going on social media, their digital comms, and then there's the action. What are you going to do with that information once you've read their digital body language?
So do you ever get a situation where I mean, my husband used to do quite a lot of stuff with kind of teenagers as part of his role in the RAF, and he would get groups of them not paying attention, or the dynamic would be a certain way. Do you have, you've got a course or something that you're trying to deliver, but then you actually have to pivot because actually you're taking the temperature of their body language or taking the temperature of the room and going, no, this isn't working, we've got to do something else.
Absolutely. But what it is, it's knowing how to do that virtually. So one of the things I talk about on my courses is what are the skills that you use face to face. So an example I always give is you're looking around the room, you're getting eye contact with people, you're ascertaining, are they interested? Are they bored? Do they look like they've got a question? And if you haven't got video cameras online, you can't do that. So therefore, you have to use the tools that you've got. So things like green tick, red X, a closed question, followed up by something in the chat window, maybe a whiteboard, open up microphones. All of those things start building up a picture. And when everybody's really slow to click the green tick, you're like, is that a technical issue? Or are they thinking? And if they're thinking, you might pivot, like you say, and go, well, type what you're thinking in chat. And then you get weird things come in which you didn't expect. And you go, okay, Bob, let's unmute you and tell me more. And that's how you start learning it. And it's understanding that technology to do what you're used to doing and reading the room and the temperature that way.
And are there two tiers to this? There's sort of training the trainer, and then it's the audience or the learner knowing how to interact?
Yeah, definitely. So what I do is train the trainer, essentially. So I'm taking people who are already teachers or trainers or facilitators and then giving them the tools of how to do that online. Part of that is design. So making sure, for instance, that even as people log in, they're welcoming them, they're speaking to them, they're making sure that the microphones are working. And then in the design, you explain the basic tools right at the very beginning. And also you make sure that you get them on audio quickly, you engage them quickly. You can't suddenly 15 minutes in go, hey, what does everybody think? And expect an instant response if you haven't built that
after a monologue.
Up. Yeah, absolutely.
So what would be, a top tip? I'm part of a virtual team, I'm online a lot, but I'm not delivering in that same way. So, what would be your tip for me if I was to suddenly sort of be facilitating a more formal session like that?
I think it's knowing your software is the very first one, because if you don't know the tools that you're using, you can't use them effectively. So there's a technical one there that you need to do. But after that, it's looking at what skills do you have? What do you really do face to face? And how can you do do the online equivalent. So how can you break down your questioning to use the tools that you've got, because you've learnt the platform, in order to build up that interaction and get a sense of your classes? And I love that, because I'm all about feeding off the energy of people. And I do that in my webinars and virtual classrooms, just like I do face-to-face.
And can you feel, you know, I'm a big one for kind of reading a room and feeling a vibe in a room. Can you do that online, do you find?
You can if you involve people. If you present at them in maybe a webinar, you can't. But if you're using the chat window, if you've got whiteboard activities, you're asking questions in polls, you're speaking to them on microphone or audio or telephone, if they're in a virtual classroom where you've got a smaller number of people, absolutely you can. Because basically you've got an extended Skype session, you could think of it that way. And if you've got the technology and the bandwidth to have people's videos on, that's even better. But that's quite rare that happens at the moment. People
Is that still rare?
Yeah, it can be.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, in meetings, I think things like Google Hangouts and Zoom, people are much more used to doing that. But certainly in the webinar and the virtual classroom space, it's a little bit different.
So there's still maybe an informal, formal divide there.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, interesting. Well, Jo, thank you very much for providing all your tips and insight.
Absolutely.
And obviously with Virtual Classroom in the ascendancy, we look forward to seeing more of you in the future.
Me too, thank you.
In the L&D world, we all know our biggest challenge is knowledge fade and demonstrating ROI from our training interventions. At Elephants Don't Forget, we use artificial intelligence to guarantee that what you train your employees, they learn and retain. If you are looking to transform the impact your training content has in your business, improve the ROI, and perhaps help employees learn and retain even the dull regulatory material, drop me a line at nelly@elephantsdon'tforget.com.
Ewan Semple is back with his individual take on the world. This time he's focusing on a very simple, obvious and important question, and that is, in a world where everything is available and with a bit of self-direction and a bit of motivation, we can find out and learn about anything. So what does that leave L&D to do?
Hi there. I was thinking back to the topics that we've covered in these short videos and the use of technology, the types of technologies that are coming our way, and thinking how many of those relate to learning in the broadest sense, and was also thinking about my own use of these tools to learn, particularly at the moment when I've got a very steep learning curve in terms of learning how to drive trucks and the procedures and the legal side of what we're allowed to do with them and not. And one of the best resources I have is a super vlogger called Kev T, who drives a large Arctic. And Kev's diaries cover all sorts of challenges and technologies, legislation, things that basically I have to learn in a very acceptable, very easily digestible form. It's great fun watching his videos. And I also was thinking about podcasts and how when I'm driving my truck, I listen to podcasts and learn from those podcasts. And I think I mentioned before how the appeal of those is that they give me direct access to smart people dealing with stuff that I'm trying to learn about, having conversations about what they know. So not experts, not dispensing facts, not a course as such, but a great way for me to soak things up. And then more recently, I mentioned previously, been using mind mapping for years, but there's been a new course delivered by a site called The Sweet Setup on mind mapping. And I invested in it, and it's been really worthwhile. It's got lots of things that I hadn't really thought of, or new uses, ways of using the technology. So basically, this amazing amount of information is available to us, and readily available to us, and available to us on these devices that we have with us all the time. And this was what was always exciting about the internet for me, that it was a great big learning machine if people made the effort or took the time or had the inclination to use it in that way. And I think that's one of the biggest problems. And I was thinking about how passive people have been, how in some ways a lack of curiosity, especially in the context of work, has meant that in the past things like self-directed learning have sort of fallen flat. I mean, I remember it being a thing while I was at the BBC, and it sort of felt as if training were just handing over responsibility to you, which in a sense is true, that's what I'm talking about. But equally in the context of work, people sort of think, oh, why should I invest? Why should I put in time? Whatever. So I know that one of the restraints or the constraints on using these technologies in the self-directed learning sense is people's own inclination. But it also, I think, in some ways raises questions about the role of learning and development. That if this amazing set of resources are available and widely available in an easily consumable fashion, then what place courses, for instance? Now, I know that in the context of work, there are certain types of information that you have to pass on. There are regulatory requirements to do so in certain ways to be able to verify that people have learned. You know, accreditation is a large part of the role of education these days. But it also leads, I think, to the question of, well, what about the future? And a bit like the other professions, I often talk about what I call the perils of professionalism, where once you become head of communications or head of learning, it becomes an end in itself almost, and the focus is on the product and the delivery of the product, not necessarily focusing so much on the individual and whether they have learned or not. So the same as with the communications role, I think rather than doing communications for us, communicators will increasingly learn to help us to communicate better. And that common shift from doing to facilitating others doing, I think is very true for the learning and development community. And the skill will be to pass on a reason why people should bother to learn. What's the reason for making an effort to become curious, to overcome whatever resistance there is to being curious, and helping people to find the right resources rather than necessarily providing content, perhaps a bit of verification of the sources and making sure that they're passing on the right sort of information. But again, I think it's a very different sort of mindset. It's a sort of facilitator, supportive, encouraging, giving people a reason why sort of a role, rather than necessarily providing content. And sometimes that takes humility. That takes stepping aside, not taking the credit, letting people own their own growth and their own development. And that can be really exciting, but it can also be incredibly intimidating.
My name's Adam Harwood. I'm a digital learning partner at ASOS. If you're looking for a learning tool that will really influence what people are doing and make a real difference, then look no further than Loop. These guys genuinely know what they're doing, and it's really helped me improve and develop as a digital learning partner. Get involved with Loop today.
Every month we try and highlight an interesting research report, which Martin Cousins, our guest, explains to me why he's picked it and why it's significant. And this month we're looking at a report called From Fear to Enthusiasm, which is about AI and produced by Oracle and Future Workplace. Martin, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us why you chose this and tell us what's interesting about it.
Because we all love a bit of research about AI.
We do love a bit of AI.
And we all love to think that we're all going to lose our jobs and it's the end of the world. And
but
AI,
it's not true.
But actually this is quite a big piece of research that is quite positive for a change. So I thought, that'd be quite good to come on and talk about how people feel about AI currently in the workplace.
And it is from fear to enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of good buzz to it.
Yeah, so Oracle basically researched about just over 8,000 people globally. So it's a significant number of people, and they were just talking about their current perceptions of AI in the workplace. They use the term robots, which is kind of weird but fairly commonplace, isn't it? So if I talk about AI and or robots, we're talking about AI basically. So the top stats, really, the headline stats are 53% of people are optimistic and excited about having AI co-workers. 64% would trust a robot more than a manager, and we'll come back to that.
So such a lot about the world we live in.
And 36% think robots are better than managers at providing unbiased information. Interestingly, 50% of respondents this year, so they did this research last year, said they were currently using some form of AI at work, and that compares with 32% the year before.
Right,
so
it's growing strongly.
Yeah, I don't think that's a surprise either.
It isn't.
But the interesting thing is the bit about managers, I think. I've sort of honed in on that because I think, just imagine that you've got your workforce trusting an AI more than their actual physical human manager.
So tell me, what does AI in a management role do better than human beings in a management role? Did it tackle that?
Yeah, so it's got a couple of tables in this. So
tell me about the tables.
I would recommend viewers have a look at this report because I think it's far more interesting and positive than quite a lot of the doom-saying stuff that's out there.
Yes.
Because it's kind of asked a lot of people what they think about AI. So
I think there's a curve. We went to the Oxford report, the Oxford research, which said we're all doomed, and that has been questioned. We've also got empirical evidence that all that stuff is not necessarily true. So we're kind of swinging back up to seeing maybe this is going to be quite helpful, make our lives easier, not destroy our lives.
Well, maybe we're just asking better questions and actually understanding what it's like at work using technology.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's probably what's happening.
And most people would not survive for a second at work if they didn't use technology. So it's an extension of a continuum, really, not something totally new.
Yeah. So
tell us what they thought.
Back to your question about what managers, what an AI can do better than a manager. It says things like provide unbiased information, maintain work schedules, problem solve, manage a budget, answer confidential questions without causing fear of scrutiny. That's quite interesting. And evaluate team performance. Now, that probably says a lot more about managers than it does about AI, which I think is quite interesting in itself. Yes. But I think it's also the realisation that you can do these, people are using technology in this way increasingly. And I think that might challenge a few organisations and quite a lot of people who think that these are the tasks that managers will do forevermore. But at the same time, we'll probably recognise the fact that managers are the cause of many problems, especially for learning teams who aren't able to engage and improve performance through teams because managers tend to be the blocker. So that's what
So that's where AI can really help.
Yeah, so
where do people think managers as human beings can help? Where do they excel and are better than AI?
Well, the number one area is understanding my feelings.
Well, fair enough.
So, yeah, it is fair.
Bit of empathy.
It's quite complex and nuanced though, because they, don't forget that people are happy to talk confidentially to an AI, but they also say that managers understand their feelings. So also about coaching, but also increasingly there are really good and interesting, sophisticated coach bots out there. But
coaching is also about understanding feelings. It's about empathy. It's about building a relationship. But anyway, go on.
Creating and promoting a work culture, evaluating team performance, problem solving too, and just providing general oversight and direction for individuals and teams. So I don't think there's, that stuff that managers do is not particularly surprising. I think it's just the fact that increasingly people are happier or happy to go and use algorithms or AIs to do some of the stuff that managers have typically been expected to do.
Yes.
And they think that they do it just as well, or if not even better.
It's almost saying, let's get the boring stuff out of the way. So providing factual information that managers, by their nature of being human beings, are going to do worse than a machine or an algorithm. And let's focus on where a manager can make the biggest difference, which is about human contact, empathy, building, developing, coaching, that it's going to be much harder for AI to do. So it's actually quite a nice split, isn't it, really?
I think it's really exciting.
Yes.
I think it could be really, really good news for managers. If organisations were to look at this and say, well, OK, so if we use technology in these ways, it will help managers improve what they do. It will help individual performance. and it could just reimagine what the role of the manager is.
Yes,
I think
I
it's
agree.
very exciting.
I do too. So let's just repeat the report. It's From Fear to Enthusiasm. It's by Oracle and Future Workplace.
Yep.
It's free to download.
Yep.
It's out recently, so you can do it now, and you should read it.
Yeah.
I think that's the message you're saying.
Yeah.
It's a substantial piece of useful research.
Yeah.
Martin, thank you as ever.
Thanks, Nigel.
Well, that's Learning Now TV over for another month. I really hope you enjoyed the show. Share with us a few things going on in the next couple of months, Kate.
Well, we've recently finished a really busy period of learning events with learning technologies, etc. But Unleash lands in London next month, in March, end of March. The CIPD annual conference in London is happening in April, and the World of Learning have a new summit that is happening in London in May, which will be interesting.
So we'll see you next month.